They say it's one of the worst Batman games ever made. Others say it was the worst Batman movie ever made, or maybe just one of them. In the past, I subjected myself to this mess of broken dreams, hopes, and expectations, subjugating my once-renowned SNES Genesis to the harsh, gritty reality of broken bits, bytes, and programming code known as Batman Forever. It was a waste of a cartridge, no worse than the dark, gloomy pits of Action 52, or maybe even the Cheetah Man, but this game in and of itself had no excuse to exist. I've seen other reviews in this pile, hoping to wrap my mind around the allegations made to bring this game to the light and aura of justice and sensibility. But in a world where such games are made to quickly cash in on an intellectual product, sensibility loses all meaning. In 1995, the movie itself was released, but with little to no fanfare to purge its already forsaken corpse. I was only a child, waiting as the blank progression of the movie continued to burn through my eyesight and send into the divots of my brain. It began with people talking through the movie, starting with two, then eventually the entire theater. I sat as I purposefully forced myself to enjoy the movie for the simple sake of it being Batman. Yet, the movie itself was becoming grating, until I was eventually convinced to walk out with the rest of the crowd, without even giving the slightest damn about the rest of the movie, or what it was like. Cut to several years later. Being the oblivious tools we were, we decided to look at the game anyway. At first glance, the game itself was mildly entertaining, at least the Super Nintendo version. My friends even convinced me well enough that the game itself was worth renting for my Genesis, which sucked even harder than the SNES version, mind you. To start the impending journey standing before me, I loaded the game in an emulator and began to re-explore the depths I have long since forgotten, and hoped I wouldn't have to remember. The game itself obviously had flaws and interpersonal conflicts in its own particular levels of painful execution. The battle game, in my opinion, was actually the best part of it. The campaign wasn't even worth bothering with after a little while. One could tell the game's controls and gameplay mechanics were lifted straight from the Mortal Kombat games. You have a high punch, low punch, high kick, low kick, uppercut, and roundhouse. The originality absolutely deafens me. Then, of course, we have the infamous hole falling saying. In most games, it would simply make sense to hold down and press jump, but unfortunately, that wouldn't make too much sense. Especially since you press up to jump. So, they decided to complicate matters by forcing you to hold a combination of buttons, and then proceeding to fall into the hole as the game expects you. On the SNES version, this can be done. On the Genesis version, without the godsend that was the 6-button joypad, you're going to need whatever resources you know. Only then to find out all you needed to do was press 2 unlikely buttons in a certain fashion. Go figure. After what looked like something of 1,000 years trying to navigate the hole in my first adventure through this game, I continued to play and find that, in true video game fashion, more enemies appear before you to relieve you of your goal. Unfortunately, these enemies reappear, waiting for you to punch, kick, and uppercut them back into the depths of oblivion. Sure, the game itself seems like it could be decent, despite the fact that the game's controls are oftentimes questionable, and the game becomes a boring, repetitive mess, and you would not want to find the motivation to keep playing, even if you reach into the darkest corners of hell just to find that one small glimmer of light. Then, of course, you have levels like this where you fight off these stupid clowns while trying to complete it as quickly and efficiently as possible. Strangely enough, this is one of the few times in the game where it actually makes an attempt to add variety, as if a lot of games in existence now don't already have this element implanted into their shells 30 times over, especially for a game of this magnitude of failure. You can also use the gadgets here, but you most likely never seem to need them, since punching and kicking everything seems to do the job just fine. But then again, you have games like Batman Robin on the SNES and Genesis, which fared to be a much better Batman game on both systems. Only thing I can really say about this is that the graphics are nice. If it weren't for the deadpan music, questionable controls, and repetitive nature, this would have been a much better tale of the Dark Knight's adventure across Gotham City against the devious Riddler and the merciless Two-Face. And, as swift as it began, I closed the emulator and backed away from the computer and asked, was it better to have played this mess on the actual consoles? Was it better to experience the pain in its genuine form, going to the lengths to locate the cartridge, buy it, than record from a TV, as opposed to just showing the basics of the game with a ROM I had the entire time.
Hell fucking